War Games Research, Rules of Play, Game Design Fundamentals, a brief introduction. So I'm here at the wargaming table, and in front of me I have the 600 plus page text. Title is Rules of Play, Game Design Fundamentals, authored by Katie Salin and Eric Zimmerman, published by the MIT Press, 2003. So I guess first some brief remarks on how I got here to this video. It is my intention to do some reading from this text. So why would I do this? So how did I get here? So several months ago, I stumbled upon this text essentially by chance. Although when I later learned more about the background to this publication, I guess it wasn't entirely by chance. I guess it was only a matter of time before this publication would find its way to my gaming table. But when I ran across it several months ago, I quickly skimmed just a few sections and found it intriguing enough to want to take a deeper look. So let me first of all say up front that when I'm reading from the text, I am effectively reading for the first time. I may have skimmed earlier, but that doesn't really amount to much. These will be raw readings. But the reason why I'm doing this is because given the few sections that I've skimmed, I was struck by at least how much similarity there was between ideas presented here and ideas that I've been kicking around in the back of my mind. So it is for me more of a convergence thing than anything else. Just intriguing, maybe perhaps perhaps this is essentially a zeitgeist thing. I don't know. But that's I guess how I got here. Now, this is not an endorsement. I don't endorse anything. Okay, so that's not it's not what this is about. So given that, I think I do want to talk about, before even starting, who are the authors, and how has this work been received? How has it been received academically, professionally, and by, I guess, the amateur or lay audience? Okay, so let's take a look here. So what is it? Rules of Play, Game Design Fundamentals is a book on game design by Katie Salin and Eric Zimmerman, published by MIT Press. Will Wright, a game designer for SimCity, when describing this book, said, quote, "This is the most impressive book on game design I've ever seen. Broad in scope, yet rich in detail. Rules of Play sets a new standard for game analysis," end quote. So I intend to hit some positive reviews and impressions and some negatives. So obviously we start off with a pretty glowing endorsement from a game designer. But the fact that it's simply a full monograph on game design is reason enough to get my attention. So Rules of Play expresses the perspective that a theoretical framework for interactive design has not yet been established. This is not the first time this has been recognized or explored, but is explored in a fresh way in great detail. The book is divided into 4 units. Okay, important to know the authors. Katie Salen is a game designer, animator, and educator. She is a professor in the DePaul University College of Computing and Digital Media. She has taught at Parsons, the New School for Design, the University of Texas at Austin, New York University, and the Rhode Island School of Design. She has an MFA in graphic design from the Rhode Island School of Design. She is the executive director of Institute of Play, a nonprofit learning design studio that bases its work on the principles of games and play. In 2009, she helped design and launch Quest to Learn, a public school in Manhattan, New York City, and later participated in developing Chicago Quest, a charter school in Chicago. Salen's work has involved the development of slow games, online games, mobile games, and big games, both commercially and institutionally. And interestingly, I like this, Salen graduated from the University of Texas in 1990 with a BA in Fine Arts. She holds a Master of Fine Arts in Graphic Design from the Rhode Island School of Design. At RISD, she studied semiotics with a gentleman who focused on the work of Charles Sanders Peirce. I had to note that since Charles Sanders Peirce is an American philosopher who I've had a long and keen interest in, so I found that interesting. Eric Zimmerman is a game designer and the co-founder and CEO of GameLab, a computer game development company based in Manhattan. GameLab is known for the game Diner Dash. Each year, Zimmerman hosts the Game Design Challenge at the Game Developers Conference. He's written at least 24 essays and white papers since 1996, mostly pertaining to game development from an academia standpoint. He's currently a founding faculty at the NYU Game Center. Zimmerman makes games and teaches game design. He's taught at universities including MIT, University of Texas at Austin, Parsons School of Design, New York University, Rhode Island School of Design, and School of Visual Arts. Okay. So at this point, I'll give the positive sales blurb about the book. As pop culture, games are as important as film or television, but game design has yet to develop a theoretical framework or critical vocabulary. And it's interesting, critical vocabulary. I am quite certain that pertains to what I've talked about before about wargaming graduating and the need to clean up terms. Anyways, in Rules of Play, Katie Salen and Eric Zimmerman present a much-needed primer for this emerging field. They offer a unified model for looking at all kinds of games, from board games and sports to computer and video games. As active participants in game culture, the authors have written Rules of Play as a catalyst for innovation filled with new concepts, strategies, and methodologies for creating and understanding games. Building aesthetics, I should say that, again, this is just sales blurb. So we're going to get to the critical viewpoints, but as a sales blurb, that's promising to my ears anyways. Building in aesthetics of interactive systems, Salen and Zimmerman define core concepts like play design and interactivity. They look at games through a series of 18 game design schemas, or conceptual frameworks, including games as systems of emergence and information, as context for social play, as a storytelling medium, and as sites of cultural resistance. Written for game scholars, game developers, and interactive designers, Rules of Play is a textbook, reference book, and theoretical guide. It is the first comprehensive attempt to establish a solid theoretical framework for the emerging discipline of game design. Again, as far as, back of the book blurb goes, this is essentially why something like this is going to catch my attention, because that type of idea of making some type of theoretical progress with respect to wargame design would be, I'll just put it mildly and say that it would be a welcome development. So I'll hit two pretty overblown endorsements. Yeah, to be realistic. Okay, Nathan Shedroff, author of Experience Design, wrote of Rules of Play. It's an exhaustive, clear, cogent, and complete resource for understanding games and game design. Salen and Zimmerman describe an encyclopedia of game design issues, techniques, and attributes. In particular, they analyze the elements that can make a game experience richer, more interesting, more emotional, more meaningful, and ultimately more successful. That, of course, and I don't consider it a foregone conclusion that this is even possible, but if that could be done for war games, wow. Again, wouldn't that be welcome? It should be the first stop you make when learning about game design, end quote. And one more, Henry Jenkins, Director of Comparative Media Studies at MIT. Quote, Rules of Play makes a monumental contribution to the development of game theory, criticism, and design. It will instantly become a standard textbook in the field on the basis of its rigor and scope. Yet it is written in such an engaging style that many will read it for pleasure. Salen and Zimmerman do for games what Sergei Eisenstein did for cinema, offer an expert practitioner's perspective on central aspects of the aesthetics and cultural importance of an emerging medium, end quote. Okay, so this is on Google Books, and I wanted to get some critical perspectives here. And there is a critical perspective here that I wanted to communicate, but as happens from time to time on the internet, we get people contributing their personal perspective, which is great, and yet this language is so horrible I can't even read it, unfortunately, so I'm gonna have to interpret it. It's written so poorly, which I cannot understand why people don't get that that's a comment on you. But anyways, still, what's important is I think this person's perspective needs to be brought in here, okay? So this is a user review. This person is not sure the authors really understand play theory. So this reviewer thinks that maybe the authors were only trying to reach for some lofty theoretical framework by hijacking play theory. So this person seems to believe that the authors basically just lifted a bunch of stuff that's already in play theory and tried to present it as a lofty, quote unquote, theoretical framework for game design. This reviewer notes that the authors extensively cite play theorist, we're talking about Huizinga, Kailawa, not sure how to pronounce it, and Sutton Smith. So this reviewer is saying, considering that they extensively cite these play theorists, this reviewer doesn't believe that the authors are naive about what they're doing. This reviewer notes that after celebrating these play theorists, some of which I just named, the authors go on to denounce their theories as problematic. Again, it's not that unusual in academic writing, and even academic writing broadly speaking. Anyways, but I noted anyways. This reviewer, I'll repeat or I'll re-hit what I already started with. This reviewer thinks that Salen and Zimmerman are just rebranding play theory, but that the extant literature does not support such a effort. So basically, this person is saying there is play theory. Play theory is fine. So there is no justifiable reason for Salen and Zimmerman to try to, essentially steal not the reviewer's word, but steal play theory and again rebrand it as game theory, I guess, as a new form of game theory. So again, the reviewer thinks that the authors have directly lifted the basis of the rhetorics of play, quote unquote, that Sutton Smith defines in a book, The Ambiguity of Play, which this reviewer thinks is basically a much, much better foundational work, seminal work, actually. So this reviewer strongly recommends that anyone actually interested in play theory read the origin of play theory through the originals and not this rehashed book. This reviewer considers the originals, including The Ambiguity of Play by Brian Sutton Smith, to be far more interesting, engaging, and deeply thoughtful than Rules of Play here. All I can say is well, actually I won't even say. I think it's pretty clear what's going on here. If this book breaks new ground, breaking new ground, and I say if it does, it's not unusual for a work like this to generate so maybe a tiny bit of reactionism. Okay, some pieces from Library Thing website. A remarkable book with an overall aim to support design of meaningful play. It's a very ambitious attempt to create conceptual structures of value. A selection of commissioned game examples. Highly recommended for its scope and its mature thinking around games and play. Incredibly comprehensive. Synthesizes almost all important pre-existing writing on the topic. Huizinga, Galois, Piaget. Monumental and essential. Essential reading for any game designer. So as I promised, some more negative perspectives or critical perspectives. Well, no, some of them are outright negative. This is from Goodreads.com. It's from one user review. The authors don't begin to understand how video games differ from traditional games, or how to talk about them as remarkably novel creations that they are. They write almost entirely about traditional games and the video games that closely resemble them. Most of the book could have been written before video games were ever invented, which shows how little they focus on how they're actually unique. Okay. Basically, don't look at this if you're interested in video games, is this reviewer's point. Another user review, The pretentious foreword was the opening number in a scattergun approach to the topic that just felt so shallow compared to discussions you might hear on The Forge or Extra Credits or N-World or really anywhere that gaming fanatics gather to discuss theory. My commentary, I'm not sure that these authors are addressing game fanatics, quote unquote. A dreary, dull text that will be of no interest to anyone that would be interested in reading it, written by dreary, dull academics. Okay, I looked at the authors. They're not dreary, dull academics, but okay. They haven't a clue really what they're talking about and know less about game design than the average experienced gamer. Okay. Another user review. Extensive in-depth study on game design. How to design games by thinking about all the different possible ways to look at games. The authors use a plethora of games, from classic card games to current games, to illustrate their points. Many parts are very interesting, but it can get dry at times. Okay, another user review. Dry yet thorough. Draws upon research and theory in sundry fields, such as cybernetics, probability, and systems theory, to develop a thorough theory of game design as a field of its own. One thing this book does both repeatedly and well is to describe a fundamental game structure and then suggest a modification of this structure that inspires thoughts of entire games based upon that tweak. Okay. Another user review. It's clear the authors are extremely well read. The book is jam-packed with different conceptual frames in which to place games, but it never really comes together as a coherent book. It feels more like a brain dump, albeit of two huge brains. That might be a very fair perspective. There were several really strong ideas that I thought could have been books or units to themselves. In particular, the idea of games as systems of metacommunication strikes me as fascinating and a rich concept. Good intro to basic game design, principles and thinkers. Content is actually good, but the text being set, okay, hard to read, okay. Heavy, extensive, and daunting, but good entry point for game design basics. From the formal mathematical logical approach all the way up to the cultural side, and it's quite an eye-opening journey. The reader must be aware that the book focuses more on breadth than depth, but again, that's good, as it's set to be a starting point for game design in general. So basically, it seeks to introduce all the fundamentals, which again, that's the subtitle of the book. Another user review. Rules of Play is an academic textbook about game design, starting from a framework with three components: the rules, organization of the game, the play, gameplay experience, and the culture, game context. Katie Salen introduces a formidable, I should say both of the authors, introduce a formidable theory of game design. While I found the theory to be on the dry side, I enjoyed reading about the design processes of 5 game designers. Another review, interesting, a lot of talk about games as art, need for critical language for game and game theory, game design theory. It's a good start. A lot of concepts are perhaps overdone, with common sense stuff being spelled out in complex language, which can become tedious after a while. Still, there are a lot of interesting ideas. Another user review, an interesting look at game design. At times a bit dry, long-winded, but there are some valuable insights. Recommended book for those who are seriously interested in game design. I think that definitely covers the thrust of these user reviews. There are more highly critical reviews, more laudatory reviews, but I think that gives a very good user perspective. So there's a more formal review of Rules of Play in the International Journal of Computer Game Research. So it's reviewed by Aki Järvinen, Finnish game researcher and designer. I'll just hit the start and end of this review. For a lowly game researcher, such as the author of this review, the first meeting with Katie Salen's and Eric Zimmerman's magnum opus is best approached with a quiet respect, mingled, of course, with a healthy amount of fear. There it is, all said and done in a sophisticated format, material evidence of the fact that there's nothing left for us ambitious theorists trying to earn our keep in practice-oriented design-friendly game research to say. Upon closer inspection, however, what appears to be ruthlessly definitive turns out to be generative. The book is a testimony to the variety of disciplines that game design and game studies can potentially draw on. Salen's and Zimmerman's goal is to identify the actual conceptual tools that are relevant to games in order to better understand game design. So does Rules of Play present game studies or game design theory? Does it provide practical design tools or methods of analysis for design students and design-minded researchers? ? The authors clearly associate themselves with praxis, yet their approach is considerably more academically founded than articles available from Gamma Sutra or the work of such authors as Andrew Rawlings, Ernest Adams, David Friedman, and Chris Crawford. Then again, it is more practical than the works of Bernard Sweets, Brian Sutton Smith, Jesper Juhl, or your average academic in a game studies conference. As a result, the book manages to bridge the emerging field of game studies methodologies and design theory. Therefore, it is recommended reading for both students of game theory and game designers who are willing to expand their thinking outside the box, and to understand games as transmedial entities, a term Jesper Juhl has used to describe games' tendency to shift between different media and technologies. Topics such as conceptualizing design as creation of experiential structure and meaning are without doubt of use to both designers and researchers, as are many other topics in Rules of Play. And I want to emphasize this because this directly addresses the quite harsh critical user review that I mentioned a few minutes ago. In Rules of Play, Salen and Zimmerman have created a valuable hub of game-related references and resources. The hub is not neutral, but it would be pointless to criticize the authors for bringing the work of Brian Sutton Smith or the New Games movement into wider acknowledgement among game designers and scholars. So this academic review of the book emphasizes some inconsistencies and does emphasize some glaring gaps, but overall considers it a success for what it's trying to do as a type of foundational written work. So I said that I would be doing some reading from this work. The purpose is really to emphasize some parallels, and in some cases, not necessarily strong parallels, but at least some interesting parallels between what they've written and ideas I have been kicking around, continue to kick around in the back of my mind. But I wanted to take this time because this is absolutely not an endorsement. It's not an endorsement, not least of which because I haven't studied this in any to any extent. And so I'm not sure exactly what I'm going to find when I look closer, but it'll be interesting. And so I wanted to very clearly lay out what I'm looking at here. It clearly is lauded by some, strongly criticized by others. It's the way it is. And I'm not pretending that it's any other way than that. So this was a real brief introduction to Rules of Play Game Design Fundamentals.